authoritarian leader.
President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
We've seen it also with Kim Jong-un, and now we see it with Saudi Arabia.
I am here today not because I want to be. I am terrified.
This is a moment that is going to galvanize the nation.
You have replaced advice and consent with search and destroy.
Don't get rattled by all of this. We're going to plow right through it.
I want you to vote. Pretend I'm on the ballot.
Democrats roared this week, crushing Donald Trump with this blue wave.
We are engaging in the change of the balance of power in this country.
The president's campaign chairman and deputy campaign chairman and national security advisor have all pled guilty to felonies. The president's lawyer is going to prison. His inaugural committee is now under federal criminal investigation. And this is all separate and apart from the special counsel's investigation.
There was no collusion. There was no obstruction.
We need to find out.
This new Congress will be something different from the Congress we have now.
Good evening and welcome to a special holiday edition of The Last Word. We are halfway. 2 years. We are more than halfway to the next presidential election. Halfway seemed very far away this time in 2016, in the final days of the Obama presidency. Halfway seemed very far away on Inauguration Day 2017, and then came the day after inauguration, when millions of Americans and millions of people around the world rose up in resistance to the Trump presidency. And then, a few months later, there was this.
Regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story.
And after that public confession came the special prosecutor, Robert Mueller, to investigate the presidential campaign, which became one of the 17 current investigations connected to Donald Trump. And then came the midterm congressional elections, in which nearly 10 million more people voted for Democrats than Republicans. And that will make Nancy Pelosi the Speaker of the House, Adam Schiff, the Chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and Richard Neal, the Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, the committee that has the authority to examine Donald Trump's tax returns. And now, 2 years doesn't seem quite so far away. The next 2 years will be filled with drama, with a Democratic-controlled House of Representatives and the mounting energy of a presidential campaign, of what will surely be the largest field of Democratic candidates we've seen in quite some time. And every day, there will be more revelations from the special prosecutor and possibly other federal and state prosecutors who are investigating the President of the United States and his family. Joining us now for a look ahead for the next 2 years are Joy Reid, the host of AM Joy Weekends on MSNBC, Neera Tanden, president of the Center for American Progress, and Jonathan Capehart, opinion writer for the Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor. And Joy, the next 2 years are going to be so action-packed, from the new Congress and what they will be doing with their investigative powers and possibly legislative powers. What do you see coming in the next 2 years?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it is fitting in a lot of ways, sort of existentially, that a woman will be leading the House of Representatives, that a record number of women and people of color, including women of color, will be coming into the Congress, because I think what you're seeing in the House, what you saw in the midterms, really is symbolic of the convulsion that Donald Trump's presidency caused. He's always been an unpopular president. He was an unpopular candidate, and women and people of color said no from day one. And now you're actually seeing that no put into practice. So what does that mean? There are two ways that the next Congress can go. They can attempt to demonstrate to the American people that democratic governance means things get done, much of which will just be stopped dead in the Senate, right? So anything that they try to pass, it will be a demonstration project to say, this is what we would do with power: voting rights, immigration rights, putting an end to children being caged at the border, environmental, cleanup, and trying to do something about climate change as a demonstration. The second thing that you could see is Democrats saying, here is how we fix the rot, really, that people are seeing of corruption out of this White House. Here are the investigations they wouldn't do that the Democrats will do. So I think you're going to see the Democrats dive in. You could see Michael Flynn, people like Cohen, dragged before Congress to have to testify in public to some of what they've, told Robert Mueller in private. So I think you're going to have those two tracks, because that is what the majority of Americans want.
And Neera, Nancy Pelosi seems torn between using the congressional powers for investigation and using them for legislation. She seems to want to find the way to do both. Let's listen to what she said, for example, about getting the president's tax returns.
There is popular demand for the Congress to request the president's tax returns. They will have their path as we go forward. I'm sure the White House will resist, and so question is, how do we go? Where do we go from there?
And Neera, that will be a confrontation that, when it happens, will be led by Richie Neal, who's going to be the new chairman of Ways and Means, an experienced Massachusetts congressman who knows his way around this kind of thing. And so that's one of many showdowns we can expect in the Congress.
You know, I think that this is a critical issue, and I think Democrats have to show that they can walk and chew gum. I think millions of people voted for Democrats. Essentially, millions of Democrats voted, millions of independents voted. Millions of moderates voted because they wanted a check on this presidency. So I absolutely think that Nancy Pelosi and the new congressional leaders, Adam Schiff, Richie Neal, just across the board, have to show that the era of Trump's, doing crazy things and everyone just looking away is over. And absolutely, they must request his tax returns. The Russia Committee, the House Intelligence Committee, should continue and start real Russia investigations. And at the same time, there's so many ways that the Trump administration has really hurt the American people, rising student loan debt, what's happening at healthcare. So there can be investigations that also demonstrate that Donald Trump and his administration have been serving his donors at the expense of the public. At the same time, they should be legislating. So I think, the Democrats have been in the minority for a very long time. They have a lot of muscle tissue. They can use that. They can strengthen that muscle tissue to legislate and investigate.
Jonathan Capehart, I'm trying to guess when the first gridlock complaints will arise in the Washington media, because the Washington media has this massive bias about the issue of gridlock. They seem to believe that the only good Congress is a Congress that's constantly legislating, and they don't care how bad or good the legislation is. The Democrats' number one job in the House of Representatives is to stop every single thing that Donald Trump wants. But the press isn't going to give them any credit for that because that will be called gridlock.
Well, I don't know. I mean, over these last 2 years, I think we have seen a reawakening of the Washington press corps, and they're so focused on we are so focused on
admit it. Come on, admit it.
We are so focused on the Mueller investigation and all of the things that the president has been tweeting and trying to do, that people are taking the tweets seriously as statements of policy and then running it down and showing how this works. This doesn't work. And so we might get some gridlock stories, but I think they will have a lot more nuance than what we're used to, Lawrence. But the other thing, there are two things that I have not heard come from Neera or from Joy, and I agree with both of them. But the number one word is oversight. Mm-hmm. We are going to get oversight of the executive branch, finally, from the House of Representatives. And whether that is investigation, whether that's hauling Flynn and Cohen and all these people up to testify, whether it's calling in Ben Carson or HUD officials to justify their budgets, we are going to start to see a very invigorated and enlivened House of Representatives. The other thing that wasn't mentioned, and I think is going to be infinitely more important given the Texas federal judge's decision to completely wipe out Obamacare, is the Democrats in the House are going to have to show what they would do to finally, if Obamacare is repealed, as Republicans have voted more than 70 times to try to repeal, what are they going to do to protect millions of Americans who are depending on the Affordable Care Act because they have pre-existing conditions, their children are on their health insurance policies, caps on medical expenses. There are a lot of things that are at play with the Affordable Care Act that would be wiped away if that federal case gets to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court actually knocks it out.
And go ahead.
Oh,
Nora.
sorry. I just want to say about that. I think this decision, I worry. I disagree a little bit with Jonathan. I don't want Democrats to negotiate basically with the Republicans. This decision is essentially a completely, I'll use a technical term, wackadoodle opinion that I think will get overturned. And my own view is I think Democrats should prepare for all possibilities, but they should not enter a negotiation with Donald Trump about the ACA. He has no goodwill. Republicans have no goodwill. I believe this decision will get overturned. They should absolutely strengthen the opinion. They should strengthen the ACA. There are many ways to do that. There are many ways to lower healthcare costs writ large. But I think this decision is really... I think
we are in agreement. I agree with you. Prepare, not negotiate. Prepare.
Yes. Okay. All right. Great. Well, I knew I would not disagree with Jonathan. So I'm glad we did that.
And with all of this, Joy, the presidential campaign is underway. People don't want to admit it, but anyone who thinks the presidential campaign hasn't already started has never read the history of a presidential campaign. This is when all the real candidates and every winner of the presidency has already been building their campaign. Let's take a look at the first poll that we have of the current possible contenders on the Democratic side. This is, as they say, a snapshot. However, there are big campaign contributors who stare at these things, and people like Joe Biden stare at that big number at the top and think, how can I not run?
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is that Joe Biden understands, having been in this game for a long time, that's name ID, right?
Yeah.
And if you're the former vice president of the United States, your name ID at about 30, it's not bad, I guess, but it's not overwhelming and crushing the opposition. I think the big number in that is 9, which is Beto O'Rourke, obviously somebody who ran and lost to Ted Cruz in Texas, but is on the minds of a lot of people who do this for a living. It's the name that I'm hearing thrown around by Democratic consultants. Some other names that I think are popping up are Kamala Harris. There's been a boomlet for Kamala Harris ever since she won that United States Senate seat in California. She's got all the requisites. She ticks all the boxes. She's sort of a female Obama. She's, multiracial. She's both African American and Asian American. She's a woman. I think that women are the hungriest. My theory is always the hungriest constituency will get their nominee. And I think women were very hungry for the White House last time. Hence, Hillary Clinton was sort of an unstoppable force. And whoever has the support, let's face it, of African Americans. And African Americans wanted Hillary, especially black women. The name I'm hearing now, there was a She the People sort of survey of prominent women in politics. Number one name of the person that's on people's minds, Kamala Harris. So I think she's got to demonstrate that she's got actual political chops, which I don't think she's done sufficiently yet for donors to pile on. But I feel like Beto and Kamala have the sort of most natural energy right now. That could change, but that's the way it looks right now.
This could be the time to run my video of when Kamala Harris was San Francisco District Attorney, and I predicted she was on her way to the White House. But we will spare you that. That's last word video in the archives somewhere. And Neera Tanden, what you do see when you look at this list is a bunch of great ticket combinations. It just looks like, wow, the Democrats have a lot of possibilities for the vice presidency and a bunch of possibilities for the presidency.
This is an incredibly talented field, and I'll say, I think there are a lot of people who are going to enter this race because they look at Donald Trump and think honestly to themselves, I could do a better job, which is a pretty low bar, but one that I think a lot of people think about. And I think I myself am very excited about this conversation. I think actually Democrats demonstrated in 2018 that they are very focused on ensuring that people can win, on electability. And I think all these candidates are going to have some version of a kind of argument to the country about the future of the party and the future they want to take the country on, but also how they are the best candidate to beat Donald Trump. I think Democrats are hungrier than they've ever been to win because, frankly, we all want this nightmare over. I know I do.
Joy, Neera, and Jonathan, thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you for joining us throughout the year on The Last Word. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And when we come back, handoff highlights. My favorite part of every night is when I say good evening, Rachel. We've got some of my favorite chats of the year with Rachel Maddow coming up next. And later, something never before seen on TV. My friend Craig Melvin interviewed me about my book at the 92nd Street Y. You will hear my answers to these questions.
What's happened to Lindsey Graham? Stormy versus Trump. Who's winning? Who wins? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of our democracy? Who is the next Obama? And if so, can he or she win?
Regular viewers of The Last Word know by now that my favorite moment of the night is when I get to say good evening to Rachel Maddow. She never knows what we're going to chat about, and I usually don't either until we're suddenly on TV talking with each other. Some nights we're both reacting to breaking news that's happening in that very minute at 10 p.m. Here's a sample of some of our favorite handoffs of the year from The Rachel Maddow Show to The Last Word.
Lucky you. It's time now for The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Rachel, don't surprise me like that. That was a little too quick.
Sorry.
I'm used to a little.
Here I come.
Yes, one of those kinds of things.
Welcome to the new normal, where the sky is green, the earth is flat, and this is a freaking bombshell. Wow, what a day. This is nuts, man. Totally normal Tuesday.
The president has given himself an A+.
Yeah, he gives himself an A+ on everything.
Yeah, he's an easy grader for himself. His polling numbers are better than Abraham Lincoln's. He seems to think that, come on, you got to stay with me here. The Federal Record Act says you cannot create a federal record and do that to it. Can't do that stuff. No, it's a crime.
I mean, presumably once somebody tells you, hey, sir, that's a crime, you can't do that, then the next time you do it, it's got to be a crime, right?
Yeah, it really changes a lot the next time you do it. Thank you, Rachel. You cannot deduct payments to the girlfriends. Those cannot be deducted.
That's actually the funnest day of tax law school. When you talk about what you can do with the payments to the girlfriends and what you can't do. There's a difference between a president having suspect ideas, but it's another thing to be unwilling or unable to engage with the implications of what you're about to do because you're so caught up in the idea of the excitement that you're about to do something big. I mean, that's, the reason that we don't let dogs drive cars. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that dogs are bad. It just means just because you can reach the pedal doesn't mean you should be able to propel this hunk of iron. Rudy Giuliani, the president's newest lawyer, proclaimed September 1st would be the end of the Robert Mueller investigation of the president.
It is like a parenting exercise in a cross-country drive, and the 3-year-old is saying, are we there yet? And you're just constantly saying, we're almost there.
Hold on a little bit. Don't hit your brother. Yeah. Yeah, even a 3-year-old eventually figures it out.
3-year-olds figure it out. We're not sure about the client the president's lawyers have.
Now it's time for The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Rachel. It's Ari.
You're not Lawrence. Let me do it again. That does it for us tonight. See you again on Monday. Now it's time for The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, except it's not. It's Ari.
You got it.
The craziness never ends. Woo!
It does not.
America. Oprah is our Oprah, as far as I'm concerned.
Rachel, have I ever looked like a guy with a strategy? Come on. I do think the highlight reel should include tonight's handoff with Chris Hayes.
Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Chris. You have to go away.
I'm sorry. I think I came to you too early. Good evening, Rachel. How are you?
Good evening. I'm fine. I was just having a man touching my collar.
Good night, Senator Klobuchar, and good night, Rachel.
Bring us over. Come on. Okay.
There we go. There we go. They're there. They're really there.
There you are.
They're really there.
Over there. Okay.
I am working Saturday night in the Rachel Maddow time slot. Can you leave a little wardrobe behind for me? Because it's a 9 p.m. look. It's a totally different thing.
I can totally loan you an $11 black blazer and a $4 black undershirt. Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Rachel, and thanks. Thanks a lot.
What?
Well, because I guess now I'm like the only guy left in America without a personal podcast.
My podcast is really weird. and it's not like a news podcast at all.
It's Rachel being really weird. I cannot wait. Wicked Weird Rachel's podcast.
Lawrence, did I miss your birthday?
I don't know what you're talking about. Rachel,
I think I missed your birthday.
Changing the subject, Rachel. Just follow my lead. I'm changing the subject.
Okay.
I have a private life, Rachel, okay? So let's just...
Sorry. So I bought a canoe last weekend. I've never had a canoe before. Unless the world ends, I plan on spending as much time as humanly possible in that canoe over the weekend.
I was going to take my new canoe to Central Park.
If we ever ended up in canoes in the same place, can you imagine the conspiracy theories? You are my little eagle-eyed friend, Lawrence O'Donnell.
And once again, we agree, and once again, you've put it better than I could.
Well, we'll see.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thanks, pal.
Thanks, pal. Bye.
Bye, Rachel. We have more of our handoff highlight reel at our website, lastword.msnbc.com. And up next, it's my turn to be interviewed. My friend Craig Melvin, co-host of The Today Show, cross-examines me next. When my book, Deadly Force, was published in paperback this year, my friend Craig Melvin and I went to the Upper East Side of Manhattan to discuss the book and other things with a live audience at the best public discussion venue in New York, the 92nd Street Y. It was just before the midterm elections, and so we talked about current politics almost as much as the book.
We have some questions here from the audience, and I will tell you one thing that's already striking is that there's penmanship of some sociopaths here in the crowd. I don't believe in censorship, so I will just read some of these as they are written, and I won't even ask who's asked the question. We'll just go anonymous here. First question from the audience: what's happened to Lindsey Graham?
I like that.
Senior senator from the great state of South Carolina.
Yeah, I don't know Lindsey Graham, and I say that because I used to know most senators, having worked in the Senate for Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, and so there's a kind of authority with which I could talk about senators who I knew that I don't have at all when I'm talking about a senator I don't know, and so I have no confidence in this. But the short answer is I don't know. But the general answer for Republicans who are completely subservient to Trump in all things is that they fear the Trump voter in their state and in their congressional district. They fear that voter. And they are working slavishly in service to that voter. It isn't Donald Trump, it's to that voter. And they're also, in Lindsey Graham's case, very seriously spending every day trying to make sure they are not challenged in a primary in their next Republican re-election campaign for the Senate. And the way you do that now is you tie yourself as closely to Trump as possible. But what's true of Lindsey Graham is you can play video of him, saying that, Trump was a con man and a liar and all this stuff, and then you can play video of him today in direct contradiction to Lindsey Graham. And, it used to be that wasn't easy to do. Most politicians feared the flip-flop more than anything in the world, because if they went on Meet the Press, Tim Russert was going to show the day they said this thing, and now you're saying this. And Tim was the master of that, but he didn't get to do that every Sunday because most politicians didn't have these glaring things, that you could put up on the screen like that. And so Lindsey Graham is the real personification now of this phenomenon of Republican senators, Republican House members, just completely surrendering to Trump. And I have to tell you that having worked in the Senate, there's one thing about this. There's one thing that hasn't been studied and pondered enough, and that is the collapse of the male ego. And that's something you never expected to see. It used to be that if you were the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, as Daniel Patrick Moynihan was, and as Bob Packwood was, a Republican senator when I was there, and the President of the United States came out and said, I'm going to apply these illegal tariffs, illegally using a provision of tariff law that's only for national defense, and I'm going to hit Canada with tariffs claiming that this is for national defense. Immediately that day, the chairman of the Finance Committee would immediately schedule not a hearing on this subject, because it's so clearly illegal we don't need one, would immediately schedule a markup of a bill to modify the law so that the president does not have that authority. They'd immediately just take it away. Because chairmen of committees were egomaniacal, power-hungry people who finally had their egomaniacal powers as chairman. So too with, speakers of the House, who presidents had to beg to do what they wanted, even when the speaker was in the same party as the president. So too with Senate majority leaders, even when the Senate majority leader was in the same party as the president. The president was a beggar to those people, saying, would you please do this? And most of the time they said no. And they gave a president some fraction of what the president asked them to do. And some part of that, a lot of that was politics, a lot of it was the dynamics of the body, but a certain percentage of it was just good old-fashioned male ego. The president wants this. Do I want it? No, I don't. I'm going to prevent it. There's no male ego left in the House of Representatives or in the Senate. That might be a triumph of some kind for a new advanced society that we're not quite accustomed to. But it's truly shocking that they get completely walked over by this kind of amateur president. And I never would have predicted that.
You look at a guy like Ted Cruz. I mean, here's a guy, the president calls his wife ugly, suggests that his father was involved in the assassination of JFK. He manages to attach a nickname to him that really has stuck in a remarkable way. And Ted Cruz has still invited him to come out and campaign for him. It really is, it's bizarre, Lawrence.
I have no words for Ted Cruz.
Again, I'm not screening these. This one from a member of the audience. Stormy versus Trump. Who's winning? Who wins?
Oh, well, I mean, Stormy's winning big time. I mean, Donald Trump is an unindicted co-conspirator in a federal criminal case in New York City because of Stormy Daniels. That's it. That's why. That's a pretty big win for Stormy Daniels versus Donald Trump.
At this point, government, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of our democracy?
That was the hardest question of the night for me, and my answer is coming up after this break, and you'll hear my answer to this question.
Who is the next Obama, and if so, can he or she win?
This is the Last Word Holiday Special, and as we look back on the year, we return to the 92nd Street Y, where Craig Melvin interviewed me about my book, Deadly Force, and because this happened just before the midterm elections, there were an awful lot of questions about politics, including possible presidential candidates.
Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of our democracy?
Oh, boy.
That's a big question for it.
I wish the word at the end wasn't democracy of that question, because that's the illusion in whose grip we now feel a bit sick, because it's the democracy part that's not working. You saw a Supreme Court justice confirmed by senators who represent about 45% of the people, and opposed by senators who represent about 55% of the people. The Supreme Court justice was nominated by a president who lost the vote, but was installed as president because of the Electoral College. And the Electoral College is an anti-democratic institution. It was intended to be. George Washington was never on a ballot. No one ever voted for George Washington. No one ever voted for Thomas Jefferson. You got to vote for the electors in your community in Connecticut, and you probably knew who they were because there were very few voters, because you couldn't be a woman and vote. You couldn't be black and vote. You couldn't be a slave and vote. You couldn't be someone who did not own land and vote in most places. And so the voters themselves were a very, very small slice of the population. That was by design of the founders. And the anti-democratic nature of the Electoral College was by design. They never imagined that you'd have, a state like Delaware, which is roughly in proportion the same size as it was then, and this place called California on the other side of the world that is the size almost of the United Kingdom in population. They never knew there were going to be population disparities like that would be so disserved by the Electoral College. And so one of the sickening feelings is that democracy isn't working, and that is because it isn't. And you can call us what you want, but we have a Senate, and by the way, I'm not sure I ever would have come to this feeling if I didn't work in the United States Senate for a big state, for the state of New York. When you're working in the United States Senate for a big state, and you're sitting there with 2, and you're looking at Idaho with 2, and you're looking at Wyoming with 2. Wyoming has a smaller population than Staten Island. 2. This is an anti-democratic institution in the extreme. And so the reasons we've been okay with that for most of our time is that, we didn't have people lose the vote and win the Electoral College. Now we've had that twice in my lifetime in very uncomfortable proximity to each other, both favoring the Republican. And so it's very hard to be optimistic about how democracy is going to work, especially when you look at the demographic patterns and you see that, California is filling up with people and, Idaho isn't and Wyoming isn't. And so, you're going to get even worse anti-democratic outcomes out of the United States Senate. And the minority, the senators who represent the fewest people, by the way, tend to represent almost entirely white people. The 5 smallest population states in the country also happen to be the 5 states with the fewest population of non-white people. And so you start to get into these very, very disproportionate outcomes there. And there's no good suggestion there's no suggestion that is actually possible that you can suggest about this, because it's not up to California to simply divide itself into 6 states, which would be a good idea for California, because that has to be approved, at the federal level where it wouldn't be. And making Puerto Rico a state is a good idea, but you could never get that approved now because that would probably deliver 2 Democratic senators. So the democracy part of that sentence is a tough one to be positive about going forward.
Who is the next Obama, and if so, can he or she win?
Yeah, he or she can win. I mean, I think the next Democratic nominee can win because Donald Trump has done something no other president's ever done, which is, upon getting elected, he was interested with a loser's share of the vote. I, by the way, never use this phrase, popular vote. That's an American phrase. You know what they call that everywhere else in the world? The vote. Because of all of our great advances in democracy that we've exported around the world, not a single country has said, wait a minute, how do we do that electoral college? Let us write that down. Not one of them has an electoral college. And so Trump gets elected and he does something no one else has done, which is he's very content with the votes he already has, and he does not ever say a single word to attract any of the voters who didn't vote for him. No other president has ever done that, and certainly no other re-elected president has ever done that. And so every re-elected president immediately started trying to figure out, how do I talk to the voters who didn't vote for me? Richard Nixon in '68 won by less than 1% of the vote. When he gets re-elected, he wins 49 states. So because he was working on that other side, as everybody is supposed to. Trump's done nothing, and that magic formula, it can't be reproduced, that he did before. And so I believe the Democrat, whoever the nominee is, will do very well against Trump. And I have to say, just on the stage, watching them on the stage basis, I did just see Beto O'Rourke in Texas about 3 weeks ago. Wow. And I was there with John Heilman and a few other, political pros watching this, and we all kind of looked at ourselves the same way we looked at ourselves after hearing Barack Obama for the first time.
Here's the thing, though, with O'Rourke, as you know. I mean, he's trailed in just about every poll conducted within the past few weeks, even within the margin, outside the margin. How has he been able to raise the kind of money he's raised and still trail in every?
Well, because of that Obama inspiration.
People get that excited when
those O'Rourke videos go out, on Twitter and online, and people are seeing this kind of Obama inspirational speaker out there. And look, I mean, he's in a state where there are 500,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats. If he was in just a marginal state, he would win. He would be a solid winner. And so I think it's a very interesting problem for a political party, because this guy is a star. He's a valuable star. And just because he comes in second in a Senate race in Texas, if he does that mean you're done with him? There's just no use for him? And I don't know what the answer to that is. But in order to advance in American politics, you usually have to win. And so if he does not win, I'm going to be fascinated to see what happens to him within the party after that.
Craig Melvin is the hardest working man in this building, co-hosting the Today Show every day, as well as the 11 a.m. hour here at MSNBC. And so I can never thank him enough for adding our night at the 92nd Street Y to his very busy schedule. Thank you, Craig. We'll be right back. My favorite week of the year this year was, as usual, the week I spent in Malawi delivering desks to schools where the kids have never seen desks, and providing scholarships for girls to attend high school in Malawi, where, like many African countries, public high school is not free. We do this through the Kind Fund, Kids in Need of Desks, a partnership that I created with MSNBC and UNICEF. And when I began doing this show 8 years ago, I told you about my very first trip to Malawi, when I was able to provide desks for one classroom on that first trip. And then I invited you to help do more. And you have done so much more. Your generosity has provided desks for almost 1 million elementary school students in Malawi, but still, 70% of the children in elementary schools in Malawi still do not have desks. And you have provided scholarships for more than 6,000 girls to attend high school in Malawi, but still, most girls in Malawi never finish high school. And that is why the Kind Fund is the permanent cause of this program. We have so much more to do, and you have been with us every step of the way. You can contribute any amount at lastworddesks.msnbc.com. Anything you can contribute will be very helpful. You can make a donation to anyone on your holiday gift list, and UNICEF will send them an acknowledgement of your gift. Amy Mendon-Soprano tweeted, "Lawrence, we have been so inspired by your nightly updates that we decided to donate in each other's names as our Christmas gifts to each other this year." Greta Otto tweeted, "Every year my daughter donates the funds from one gift to charity. Thanks to Lawrence, she chose Kind. I know the children of Malawi will enjoy their new desk. I have such an awesome kid." Yes, you do have such an awesome kid, Greta. And here are the kids at the Gangala Primary School who received their desks this year on Thanksgiving Day. They spontaneously broke into songs of celebration when the trucks full of desks arrived, as the kids always do when that happens at their schools. They took great pride in carrying the desks into their classrooms themselves. It really does feel like Christmas morning every time we deliver desks to a school. Most of the kids don't have any furniture at home. They have been sitting on the floor or the ground their entire lives until those desks arrive. What we take for granted, a desk in school, is awe-inspiring for them. It becomes their little stage on which to perform, their new perch, to show their teachers what they can do. Dr. Lena Brown tweeted, "Dear Lawrence, per Dad's request, Mom gave a girl a scholarship for 1 year via the Kind Fund. The only present he ever wants for Christmas or his birthday is to help a young woman get an education. You have now provided high school scholarships for over 6,000 girls in Malawi, where the high school graduation rate for girls is much lower than the boys' graduation rate, and girls need a lot of extra support to stay in school. It is very common for 13 and 14-year-old girls who are forced to drop out of high school because they cannot pay their school fees to very quickly end up married and pregnant and become young mothers, most likely stuck in a lifetime of poverty in their village as a result, with no real marketable skills. The scholarships you've provided have changed girls' lives. This year, we introduce you to some of the Kind Fund Scholarship girls who are now in college and are doing very well. One of them, Sarah Vula, who I met 2 years ago when she was in high school, is now starting medical school in China. Without your help, these girls would not be where they are today. Here is Fanny Chimwa, who I met 2 years ago when she was in high school and is now a freshman at Chancellor College in Malawi.
So when we met, my life changed because you helped me, you paid my school fees, you reduced my problems at home. So a lot happened that without you, I couldn't be here.
Fanny thanks you, along with the thousands of girls who you have been supporting and the million kids who are sitting at those desks now who are very grateful. And they always say thank you in song.